Hey, thanks for joining the Daily Ant to talk about philosophy and ants. Would you be able to introduce yourself a bit and tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Hi, Benjamin.
Hello, Vida.
My name is Vida Yao. I'm assistant professor of philosophy at Rice University. I'm also a moral philosopher at the Door Institute for New Leaders. And I work in ethics. I work in moral psychology. I'm writing a book right now on grace or gracious love. I like ants.
Well, I assume if you're working on graciousness and love, you have to like ants. But
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, God, that is a good question. Why do you say that?
well, I guess that's a good question too. But I feel like I love ants and everyone should love ants. But do you think? I guess one question like do you think? I'm not sure exactly specifically what you're working on with graciousness, and you could explain that a bit. And also, I'm wondering if if it's possible for us to have graciousness towards ants, or for the ants to have graciousness towards each other.
Well, so there's so we could talk about the conception of grace that I'm arguing for, but then also kind of who cares? I mean, I was thinking about ants because I really do really love ants. Like, I don't know the science of ants, and you can tell me more about the science. But I was trying to think of when was the last time I was really obsessed with ants. I was really, really obsessed with ants when I was little. When I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with ants because, I was obsessed with insects in general.
You're even ahead of me.
When did you become obsessed with ants?
It wasn't until high school. But what did?
Okay.
Yeah, what do you like? What sort of things do you do? Do you watch them a bunch, or do experiments with them, or?
Well, yeah. So I was very young, and I don't know, bored. But ants are so interesting. I mean, lots of insects are interesting, but ants are so interesting because the differences between different kinds of ants from just the morphology, which a child can pick up on very soon. It's right, yeah. Isn't that right? There's the soldier ants and the worker ants,
and red and yellow.
Yeah, right. And they're different colors, and you can do things to them. You can give them things to eat. And you can watch them pull it apart. You can collect them all in a jar and shake the jar around, which I used to do, which disturbed my father to no end. There was just a lot of stuff you could do, and so I think I must have been 6 or 7, and I had this mission, which was I needed to find a young queen ant.
Huh. Oh, prior to her going and making the nest and stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Which usually they don't have wings and stuff is usually a sign, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because you can collect a lot of ants, but you'll never have a colony until you get the queen.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah.
and they're always just unhappy. They sort of will make tunnels, but they're just they're trying to get out of the jar. It doesn't matter how much sugar you give them. They're just trying to get home to their mothers. And so I was okay, I'm gonna find a young queen. And it is hard because they look kind of like the dudes, right?
Oh yeah, so actually the worker ants, so all the ones without wings actually they're all female. Actually.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
It's a separatist feminist fantasy.
Oh right, yeah. The males literally just live for a day, man. Oh, but right, the ones that have wings, when the queens have wings, then they look to a lay person would look.
7-year-old child.
Not offensively, I didn't mean that. Yeah. Would look similar to the males because of having the wings, but when they're mated, so when they're actually able to make a colony, they would usually do not have wings because they rub off their wings after they mate, actually.
Yeah, that's so. Just think about that for a second.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They also digest their wing muscles to provide food for the babies and stuff. Yeah.
That's sorry, I should swear. That's crazy. Okay, so. Right. But I never see, to a lay person, i.e. a 7-year-old girl, I didn't know really what a young queen looked like, but I knew that I needed to find one. And so I got pretty obsessed with trying to find one, and then I did find one.
Oh, cool.
And I brought her into the house, and I showed my brother, and we were so stoked, and we were just like
That's
staring
awesome.
at her and staring at her, and then suddenly she was gone.
Oh, you mean like she just like flew away or something?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then like a month later, my dad, who again did not, it's not like he didn't. It's not like he didn't like that I liked ants. He just didn't like that I tortured them.
which is probably a sign of his caring about you as a person and your.
Of course. He used to be like, "This is like a gulag what you're doing." No, she was just like in an instant, she was just gone. She was gone, and then a month later, my dad was like, "Why are there so many ants in the house?"
So it's possible that you brought a whole. So maybe it was a great act of love towards this aunt. You actually provided her a beautiful home.
Yeah, she ate all the ramen noodles she wanted. I don't know.
So would that be graciousness then on your conception of graciousness?
I mean, it's like accidental hospitality.
Oh.
So I guess. Sorry, I'll close that. I guess
okay.
so. The conception of grace that I'm developing, it starts with this just a small little thing that a philosopher, Robert Adams, writes about, where he says grace is just that aspect of love that outruns the excellence of its objects.
That's very poetic. It'll probably take me a second to think of what that means, or you could elaborate.
It's taken me years. But and like the stuff that I'm working on now, I mean, I'm really focusing on grace toward other human beings. But I do think about whether or not it makes sense to extend the concept as I'm using it to nature. But then it just seems like I don't know what to make of that, because ants are excellent. Right?
I mean, that's a very ant-lightened point of view as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that's.
How many ant puns do you have to like restrain yourself?
It gets redundant, and like I'm extremely persistent, and it's like people start to become ant rage at a certain point. So I really should just be. Do
you get mad at yourself?
Sometimes, but see, I feel like I should also have grace towards myself, probably, because
you should. It's true. It's true. You should. It's not your fault.
Actually, I'm actually wondering in terms of the concept. It sounds like the concept of that you've been unpacking for years of the one person who his last name's Adams or something. Like it seems like it's related to like expectations or something, or what you're like because it just, I don't know, with the word excellence, or it seems almost like it's like maybe. Like, is that why maybe it's a little weird applying it to nature? Is that humans tend to actually not really have like moral expectations of nature, or like?
Well, I mean, I'm using the idea more broadly than just like moral failings, right? So it's like, so your tendency to make these bad ant puns, like that's not a moral failing, right? It might be like an aesthetic failing. It might be like a
wow.
personality. It might be like a bad sense of humor. It's not a moral failing, right? But nonetheless, like I could be gracious toward that aspect of you. Like if we were friends, I might come to love it, even though at the same time I recognize it as a failing. Right?
I see. Interesting.
And if as a self-regarding virtue, you would recognize it in yourself. You wouldn't. I assume you wouldn't come to think like, actually, this is what it is to have an excellent sense of humor. But it is
someone
what it
might.
is.
Theoretically, someone might.
Theoretically, someone might, and then we could have an argument about whether or not that was the right judgment to make. I would venture that they were mistaken, but not, but it depends. Like, I don't know how many ant puns, it could get relentless, and if, you could only make ant puns, but, I don't know you that well, so I'm not going to make any.
Interesting. So then, is that, conception then, so it wouldn't necessarily be moral, because it could be even, then could it even be applied to I don't know, graciousness towards the way someone makes a food or something where that's not necessarily ethically charged or morally charged, but it's just you just choose to or something, or is it despite of however you might feel about it or something? Or?
Yes, depends on what you mean by despite, but sometimes when people say despite, that can be a couple different things. So if I say look, I like Benjamin despite his tendency to make these bad ant puns. There's a way in which that could be interpreted as look, Benjamin's got all these great qualities, and I appreciate those qualities, or maybe I appreciate, just the history that I've shared with him, And so, like, this thing that he does, like, I'm just sort of gonna, put it aside. Like, it's, despite. And so if that's what someone means by despite, then I think that's not really grace as I'm understanding it, right? So fully spelled out on the conception I'm arguing for is that grace is an affectionate appreciation of human nature, which includes the defects and the various failings, as we all know, of the various failings of human nature.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it would be like interesting. So then I feel like you could probably apply that to ants in the sense of like a lot of people will say things like I hate ants or I want them out of my house, but then somebody could maybe a gracious response would be to actually like even acknowledging that like it annoys you, but actually still just kind of like that's part of ant nature to like go look for food or something, and like with that I don't know if that would count.
I mean, that doesn't lead to the practical result that I'm going to let the ants in my house. Like I probably would, I wouldn't. I would exterminate them if they were in my house.
I mean, I guess it's an act of graciousness, like me continuing this interview after that statement. Would that be that's the second article on the Daily Ant is to love your. Oh no, the first article I think is to love your house ants. So maybe they'll be reading for later.
Use like chrysanthemum spray to keep them out of the kitchen. How about that?
That's nice because that's not killing them. I guess yeah, that's just true.
I don't know if I would kill it if it got out of hand. If it got out of hand, I would kill them.
Interesting.
But anyway, I'm not. So the thing is like there's a respect in which also my work is not focused on. So sometimes people talk about ethics as necessarily focused on providing guidance to action.
Oh, and you say yours is not.
No.
Interesting.
So yeah. So I work in all of these lines are debatable, but like there's a respect in which I work in virtue ethics, and so the thought is, here's what I'll talk about. I'll talk about the virtue of graciousness. I'll talk about the psychology of it. I'll talk about the emotions that constitute it. I'll talk about the virtues that maybe are the other virtues that are maybe needed to sustain it. I'll talk about the value that you get if you have this virtue. But am I going to tell you whether or not to kill the ants in your house? Like, no. That's not.
So like, would that be what I understand by having cursory association? Would that be what's referred to as applied ethics, or like?
That's also just like that's a whole can of worms.
Oh, okay. Or a basket of ants.
If you wanted to, but it's like that's a lot. I mean,
no, yeah, that's fine. We don't need to go into detail on that.
So no, let's not. Yeah,
that's totally fine. Yeah, like plus we wouldn't want to stray too far away from the ants, anyways. But so yeah, that's interesting. And that totally actually it makes sense to me. Like of just describing it's more like almost descriptive or like investigative or what it means rather than like or what it might be or is rather than like what it should be or how you should like.
I mean, so again, that's another line that's like a very it's a controversial line at least for me because sure, like there's a respect in which I would just say it's descriptive whether or not somebody is or is not gracious, right? But because it's still an evaluative term, like I'm still saying it, it can be good for these reasons.
I see.
Right? Then people start being like, okay, well, is that normative? But then sometimes what they mean by normative, they mean prescriptive, and sometimes what they mean by prescriptive is action guiding, and then I'm like,
I see.
So
yeah, I always get that confused.
It's like how courage is good. Like, am I telling you ought to be courageous? Like, I'm a little bit like, well, who are you? Like, are you my kid? Like, if you're my kid, then I'm like, yeah, you ought to be courageous. But, like, I just met you. It's, like, kind of none of my business. Like, I can judge you.
Yeah.
Just, like,
and probably are.
Yeah. They am.
Yeah, man.
Like, I'll keep that to myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, as, like, a slight topic shift, I also... I was interested in, like, I saw that you had, like, I think you've been working a bit on, like, implicit bias, like, type things. This is quite a topic shift from graciousness, I think. And I'm curious because, like, one thought that had to me was, well, one, it'd be interesting for you to kind of discuss maybe your main, like thoughts on some of that work, but also, like, I'm curious to know if it's possible to have implicit bias against ants. And if so, if it's objectionable, and if so, if it's objectionable, and this question is actually coming from Philosophy Friday's executive producer Joshua Blanchard.
Okay, so another fascinating thing about ants is that you can start like race wars between them.
That's an interesting concept. Actually, it is true that there is, although whether or not it's probably anthropomorphizing to call it race, perhaps, but but and it's definitely controversial. But
I kind of like it now.
it happens to everyone. But like whether there actually was an interesting discussion about because there's like slave driver ants is one like colloquial term for like some type of ants that will actually go and like steal the babies of the larvae of other ants and will rear them as their own and make them do all the labor and stuff like that.
There's just ants. Wait, what's it? No, never mind. That's like a different thing that like takes over their brains.
Oh yeah, that's the fungus, the like Ophiocordyceps like fungus. That's like it's real creepy. But these ones. Yeah, no, it's real creepy. And but these ones, that's what they do. Is that they do this, but there's some discussion about whether or not, really if it's like offensive or kind of like a problematic like analogy, because it's like some of the importance, like there's like a subjugation of will and stuff that is like part of that is probably not exactly happening with ants, but.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned. I mean, I feel like this is just me. Like, I would use the term sort of as a joke, but I probably wouldn't want to, like, go throwing it around.
No, exactly. And so I think the discussion was about, especially in, like, public, like discussions, or if we should think about that, and especially on top of there being, like,
TED Talk about slave driver ants. And I'm going to talk about masters and slave. Like, that seems a little bit, I don't know. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't do it, but anyway.
Like that would be I think kind of awkward. But anyways, but overall, there are things somewhat similar where there could be like different species of ants that are like literally fighting each other and stuff like that for like territory, or like capturing the workers of another ant species.
I used to do it as a kid. Like I would like lead them to each other.
Yeah.
I was on an 8chan forum board or something, like just trying to get a race war started between the ants. You know what I mean?
Wow, that is a very topical like reference, but it is awkward.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Bias.
No, yeah.
Bring it back. So I co-wrote a paper with a philosopher named Sam Rees-Dennis, who's at Albany Medical School. It's a paper. Basically, what we're doing is here's when we put the argument that there's a lot of empirical psychology which has been interpreted as yielding the result that all of us possess implicit bias. And like we don't disagree with some version of that claim, but we're philosophers, so we're just like, well, what do you mean by that? And so there's like a kind of layperson understanding of implicit bias that has been popularized by a lot of those psychologists, which is, and it's like Hillary Clinton, 2016 saying, we all have implicit bias, right? So this isn't just a problem with police brutality. We all have implicit bias. Now, the thing is that, again, it's not that we disagree with that, but when these scientists are going out and testing people for the presence of implicitly biased attitudes, it turns out that the surveys that they use to rule out that the racist behavior or action that is performed by the test subjects is not the result of just like straightforward
like racism or like prejudice or
Exactly. Like they don't do enough to rule that out. And partly, and so if I were to get so because I'm really interested in the philosophy of emotions, partly my kind of background diagnosis is that it's just we need a better conception of the ways in which the emotions inform racism. So it's not just like ill will. Like it's, so that would be like a kind of very simple example of how to analyze racism.
Okay,
right?
because I guess one thing was maybe that would have to be like it's usually conceived as something very conscious and like intent. Those like explicit intent kind of like baked into it and stuff.
So you can read ill will a couple different ways. You can be like, but you can break apart ill will. That's the problem too. Is that ill will is also a complicated concept. It's like, okay, if I could have. It's true. I could have unconscious ill will toward you. Or subconscious, not fully. I might not be fully aware of my ill will towards.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But nonetheless, why would it be ill will and not, disgust? Well, it's because I actually want, to cause harm to this person, or I would be happy if something bad happened to them.
I see.
Et cetera, et cetera. But so again, one distinction is this like conscious unconscious thing, which a lot of philosophers of mind have tried to work apart and tease out, and it's hard to know exactly what that means, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But there's also just like the rich content of the weird attitudes that we have toward one another. So it's like, you know, most of the racism, I would say that, and I'm not saying, you know, whatever, but most of the racism that like an Asian American woman, for example, would experience is not ill will. Like, I don't feel like people in general go, like, I think even the alt-right doesn't really have ill will toward me because they kind of see like Asian women as like a sexual commodity.
Huh.
And so they're kind of just like, it's just like, is that ill will? No, but it's still like a form of racism. You know?
Like, seems like pretty transparently so. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like, so, you know, you take someone who's like, who's like writing a manifesto or something about like the different, you know, races and how everyone needs to go back to where they're from or whatever.
Yeah.
And you ask them questions like, do you hate black people? And they're like, no, I don't hate black people.
Yeah.
Right. And then we ask them these like kind of crude questions, and it turns out you could get a measurement that says like, look, turns out the guy doesn't hate black people.
Oh,
right?
because it's pretty much based on like conscious, self-expressed, like,
you know, it's funny. It's
thoughts
like
or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, but again, and we don't go into that much depth in the paper about this. But like, even if you were, I mean, if you just look at the questions that are asked for a lot of for maybe not like the, you know, not the test as described as published, but the test as it tends to be used in the data collecting setting.
Yeah,
it's like the questions don't even get remotely close to even like one coherent conception of like conscious ill will.
Oh, so it'd be like a mix, like they're kind of like all over the place or something.
A little bit all over the place, and so then it's just sort of like. And then this comes down to like the ethical, the kind of ethical conclusions, or like the ethically significant conclusions for us, which is like, first of all, like you shouldn't go around telling people that like what the problem is implicit bias if it's not.
Yeah.
Especially because typically a further understanding of implicit bias comes with like thoughts that like it's not under your control, or even if it's under your control, it's like doesn't really say anything about you, blah 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 blah. And then like people walk away being like, I don't know, I'm just implicitly biased, you know. It's just because like we don't have integration, so I'm not used to being around people who look different from me, so it's just like implicit. But it's like, no, sometimes it could just be like you're disgusted by people that are different from you, or you know. And so
like and like that could be true, like, and yeah, even if there's not intent or whatever, like somehow, or of course there also is, or right, and what even counts as intent is probably it's hard, but like I could see that also. Is morally relevant, like the conception of implicit bias, and at least in practice, at minimum, in practice with the impact it has on people. That makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting.
How am I like supposed to view? You know, how am I supposed to view a person, right? Like, how do I? So sometimes when we talk about responsibility in philosophy. Like there's definitely like a sense of responsibility. It's like where I want to it's not that I want to blame you necessarily, but it's just like I want to see you as a person who has a set of attitudes toward me that are attitudes that are like rich and contentful. You know, it's like you associate, let's say like poor people with garbage, like that's not just some kind of like totally random association. Like that has significance and meaning. You pick that up from somewhere. Yeah. And so I would want to talk to you about that, right? And to see you as a person who could kind of like think about that and undo or rethink about like why it is that you associate poor people with garbage.
Yeah.
Anyway, ants. So yeah. So you could be sure, you could have all sorts of weird, crazy attitudes toward ants, but probably it just like it maybe just doesn't matter as much morally because, you know, ants are not like ends in themselves. Sorry.
Wow. I didn't realize that. So
no moral concern. I have a lot of moral concern for ants, but they're not people, and I'm kind of a speciesist. So
yeah, I mean, full. Well, you know, I mean, as editor-in-chief of the Daily Ant, I have to maintain some amount of proactive stances for ants. So that's what I got.
Very pro ant. You know?
That's good. Yeah. Why? So like, do you think that actually people? Do you think any of the implicit bias research stuff like actually would apply to people's feelings about ants, or is it even like actually kind of like offensive, even like bad to even like make a connection between those two because it's like
slavery, like is this like a sim? Yeah, like I would do it as a joke, but like I don't know that I would want to like say too much.
Yeah, like not in any real sense. Yeah.
But it would be, but I actually don't know. Like, you've interviewed more people. You've talked, obviously, you must talk to people about ants all the time. Like, I don't know what the general attitude toward ants is. Like, do people not like ants?
It's interesting. Like, it does seem like there is a general, like aversion. Like, even people who like ants, like, don't want them in their house type thing. And, but it is funny, though, how actually people.
Tigers. I don't want a tiger in my house.
But yeah, but like butterflies or like some.
Butterfly in my house. Oh my God. If there's a butterfly in my house right now, I would have a panic attack. That's so scary.
I guess I'm imbuing. Yeah, I'm not having enough of a broad conception about your life experiences and beliefs. But I think it is though interesting that there is actually a, like, I think also the least beautiful it is to a person, to the average human, or the least like similar it is to humans, the more like aversion there is. Because I would also say there's actually, I think, more aversion to flies than there is to, or like centipedes than there is to ants. And I think part of that is because we like relate to the like social nature of like ants and stuff, and I think that's like interesting to people. And so that's why also an interesting case where there's just some kind of like inherent, I don't know, just like attractiveness to that. Even for people who don't want them in their house, still more people probably think those are interesting than they would think flies are interesting. Which is nothing against flies for any dipterists that are watching.
Flies also like eat like corpses and stuff like that, and
well, like some ants eat a lot of insect corpses, but
I feel like we don't really. Yeah, they eat insect corpses, right? But they don't eat human. Do ants eat human? I'm sure ants eat human corpses.
They probably would eat like the juices coming out of. Yeah, I would think probably. Although, like, and I know that some ants also like to like eat vertebrate urine and stuff.
But some butterflies.
Oh, yeah, I think that's true. I always forget about that, actually. I despite being an entomologist, I always have a very narrow conception of what butterflies will consume. But
no, they'll just suck that horse pee right up. But no, I mean, the thing is about a fly. It's like, if you've ever. So first of all, Americans, I'll say Americans, because it's very different in different cultures. Americans don't like dead mammal bodies. If they're, they really don't like them. And to come across one can be pretty upsetting to people. Like, I posted a picture of a dead cat to my Instagram.
Because as one does, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm morbid. I mean, I think it was sort of like I have like sort of Buddhist sensibilities, not all the way down, but, and part of some Buddhist practice is to really contemplate, like, philosophy arguably is a lot of contemplating about death, and I teach a course on death, and so I think there's something sort of important about a human's ability to confront their own death, but like part of being able to do that is like just confronting the death of other things.
Yeah.
Especially things that like I realize like I understand maybe I shouldn't have done. No one got like offended, but someone like flagged it as like upsetting, which I know it is upsetting. Yeah.
I guess there's a complexity there about kind of whether or not it's ethically okay to like knowing that it's going to cause like psychic stress in someone else, and
I don't have any qualms with causing people psychic stress.
Okay, yeah.
Like, I have qualms with wronging people, but like we could talk about that. But I don't have any qualms with causing people psychic stress, and like especially if you're like following my Instagram account, you know what I mean? Like, you know what you're getting into. So, but and when I lived in North Carolina, like a thing that would happen a lot is that deer would die in the yard. So you just imagine like a hot summer day in North Carolina, and you're just walking around, and you start smelling something, and you turn the corner, and there's just this massive, like, writhing corpse. Yeah, and it's not writhing with ants.
Yeah,
it's writhing with flies and maggots, and so it's just like as soon as you like have that, in your.
I mean, one of my most evocative memories is actually it was a badger, I think, and it was in my biology and incest course with Dr. Brian Schultens at the University of Michigan Biological Station, who was it?
Good shout out.
Oh yes, because I gotta give credit because it was a transformative experience, but there was a badger. There was actually like no ants in this one, but it was a badger that had decayed, and the mammal people wanted them, and all just wanted it to be able to get the skeleton of it. But actually, like Brian was, let's first use it for the incest class, where if people wanted, they could go up to it, and you put it up kind of apart away from where people were staying. But we could go to it and like see the stages of like insect insect like occupation of the corpse. And like we'll say it is actually, I think, the only thing to date, and I've even seen other sorts of things like bleeding blood stuff or whatever other things, but I think it's the only thing to date that I actually like had to, like, I had the visceral like had to walk away experience when we lifted it up and there was all the writhing. And and I wouldn't be surprised if you mentioned being a very American, or at least mentioned other cultures as well, but that like Americans have a particular aversion to dead things. Like I
want to know where like the meat we eat comes from.
No, exactly. No, I was just going to say that it seemed interesting to me, even like linguistically. Like I think about, I know like some other languages like they'll actually have the name of the animal like in the term for the meat, whereas in the U.S. we see
in Mandarin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then like in English we say like pork, or we say like we don't say like pig meat, and like it's like, but like it's funny how it's a total fake thing. So yeah. Anyways, so
no.
But so I think and I've now lost the train of what it was. It was about the visceral.
So we're talking about grace toward ants, or like grace toward nature. And so like again, like I don't. In a way, it's sort of, I guess it would just depend on one's own evaluative stance toward like a decaying corpse or to ants. I guess we were talking about how in general people have more an aversion to flies than to ants. And I didn't know what people in general think about ants. I actually have no real problems with ants at all. I like them. I just don't want them in my house, but that's for different, it has nothing to do, they shouldn't take it personally.
I mean,
don't make a joke about that. Okay. So, yeah, so like, would it take grace to be able to kind of look at that writhing, let's all agree that whatever. Let's agree that we, or whatever, as broadly as we extend that we, have this kind of aversion to this writhing corpse. Would it be an act of grace to try to see that as something beautiful, rather than just disgusting? And like, I'm not going to defend that anywhere, but it seems to me like, yeah, that could be a form of grace. But then again, it's like, maybe there's something excellent about this process of decay. There is obviously something excellent about the process.
Oh, right, which is different from the conception of grace, which you had said, which was that like it's a kind of like, it's not necessarily saying like, it's not necessarily making an evaluative statement on like the things that you're being gracious about in like, there
is there is an evaluative statement. There's like an evaluative like take on the thing, which is that it's not good. It's not. Right. So the work, it comes out of a dissertation actually that was focusing on acrasia.
I saw that term, but I didn't know what it meant.
So it's a Greek term, and it gets translated misleadingly into weakness of will. So what I'm still just like very generally interested in this, is just any case in which our evaluative judgments, like our sincere evaluative judgments, diverge from our emotional or motivational desiderative like responses. And so just any case where it's like, yeah, I know that sucks, but like I love it, or like, I know that that's awesome, but like I just don't feel it, and so that's too broad in the way that acrasia was used historically as a term, but that's the way I can like point to it. And so anyway, so that's the kind of general thing that I'm focused on. So for grace, it's like, it's really important to me because and it's important. I think it's important for a lot of virtue ethicists that that virtue, that a necessary condition for virtue is evaluative knowledge. Like that's why partly why virtue is hard for lots of reasons, but one reason why virtue is really hard is like you have to know what's good and bad. Like you actually just you have to know, you have to get it right. No one's ever perfect at it, but you got to strive to get it right. And so for grace, what I want to hold on to is like the person. So if we move back to the paradigmatic case of having grace toward another person, like a friend or a sibling or a lover, or a parent or something like that, which is that you see them clearly. You see them clearly, and that's coming from a thought discussed by a philosopher named Simone Weil, and then discussed by another philosopher named Iris Murdoch, which is like love is attention where that's not, it's attention that's getting something right. You're seeing the person clearly. You see them. You get them. You get it.
Oh, yes. So maybe it's also almost like it wouldn't be grace if you were only seeing the good, like the good, whatever, the good things about them, whatever. In fact, actually, grace almost like it requires that there's you had this like proper full conception of somebody or something. Interesting.
Yeah. Because there's lots of, because I think, it's naive to think that you do well by a person by just only seeing the good in them.
Yeah.
I think maybe it depends on what they need and stuff like that. But a lot of the time, it's like someone just needs, there's like even memes about this. Like, I was seeing, like you need to really see a person and understand.
Yeah, and it actually seems to comport pretty directly with like the religious concept of grace as well. Of like it wouldn't be grace. So when people talk about God's grace or whatever, or whoever the religious deity is in a grace-oriented religion or whatever, but would be like something like that. It would seem to me like you would it only exists because supposedly some kind of negative or sin or something like that is being like I would say despite, but I'm sure that's inaccurate. But like despite of that, or amidst that, there's still this response that is not like it's like aware of, but not only about the negative parts or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah,
something like that.
Exactly. And so a paper that is forthcoming in Phil Imprint, where I write about this, and I write it in light of the value of intimacy or closeness between people. And the thought is something like, look, if someone did something, I don't focus on really actions, I focus more on character traits, but we could just focus on actions as like a simple model for a second. Like if somebody did something that they take to be, pretty lousy, and they're a normal human being, and they're kicking themselves, and they're feeling pretty down about that, it's interesting that it doesn't really help to restore like reconciliation or closeness with them and with what they need to just be like, nah, it wasn't a big deal.
Oh yeah, right.
Like no, like that wasn't a big deal, or like you didn't do it, or like but you were drunk, so don't
Yeah, I tried to excuse it or something, or like yeah.
So,
so interesting. That's true. Like I would not consider that like grace. Yeah, like a conception of grace. Yeah, that would actually seem to be almost like there's almost something like ungraceful about that or something, or at least I'm loving, but maybe I'm conflating. I'm kind of conflating those terms probably.
Right. So, and so then I guess in light of that, then and this is why like I'm focusing on like relationships between humans, and there's also lots of interesting questions about having this attitude toward non-human objects, but there's no like ants don't need us to feel intimate with them. So so the argument would have to value of the virtue toward non-human things would just have to go differently.
Oh right, yeah, because it seems very like relational or something, and that like so because we can't really relate to ants as much as I might want to, or someone else might, or readers of the Daily Ant might want to, you can't like. Yeah, we can't really have this.
They don't care. They don't care. Like, I mean, I've been reading a lot of Walt Whitman, and like, Walt Whitman wants to like integrate his atoms into like everything. And when I'm in nature, I can often feel like that. Like, and if and I think when I was a child and I was like obsessed with insects, it was sort of like that, where it was like, there is actually some kind of, I don't know if you ever get this, but there is this kind of like desire for like intense intimacy with something that's not human, but.
Yeah, it's possible maybe feelings of like sublime are kind of like that sometimes, I think. Yeah. It's just like dissolution into like the the matter and whatever, and there's something so nice about that idea. But I'm gonna go out on if we're doing that with them or not. Yeah, that's understandable. Oh, sorry, it actually was just cutting out for a second on my end. Oh, I think it's good. Okay. Yeah. So I was just realizing too that we've been chatting for almost 40 minutes. That's amazing. I can do like a short little like lightning round of questions based on your
lightning. Wait, I love it. Let me sit up. Okay.
Just basic. So I didn't have this idea before, but I thought of it. But if I saw that you've like worked on like boredom some, and like published an article called like Boredom and the Divided Mind. And so what I'm wondering is can ants be bored? And can an ant colony be bored?
Yes, an ant can be bored.
An ant can be bored. Can an ant colony be bored?
Not if their mom is with them.
I see. Interesting. And how come in 3 sentences or less?
Because if their mom is with them in the jar, that I've collected them in, then they still have purpose and meaning. If she's not, they are just losing their poor little ant minds.
That's amazing. I might save that quote to the top line in the article, but when I post the interview, but then I also see that you have a piece called "The Undesirable and the Adesirable," and I'm wondering if, in your opinion, ants are undesirable, adesirable, or something else.
Well, what do you want to do with them?
That's complex. I just want to be around them and just in.
So it's interesting. So Talbot Brewer, who's a philosopher, has an argument about desire, where he says philosophers, because philosophers try to always say that desires have to have propositional content.
What does that mean? Oh, so we do all this. Yeah, what does that mean?
Sorry. So it means all desires have to be able to be spelled out in a proposition. So I can't just say So it's like if I said something like, I want that cup. A lot of philosophers would be like, no. In fact, you want to hold the cup, or you would like the cup in order to drink out of the cup.
I see.
And so Talbot Brewer, he just says no, that's false, because here's a counterexample. When you want a person, and I think he kind of goes on about how if you want a person, there's not really a proposition that. We could pretend that there's a proposition that fully captures the content of your desire, but that is total pretend, right?
Yeah, it'll be insufficient explanation or something, or
insufficient. If you really want a person, it will always be insufficient. This is why we have poetry, right? So, so could you want an ant in that way? Walt Whitman definitely did. And that's fully intelligible to me, actually, though I'm not in on it, depending on my mood and my sobriety.
But at least theoretically, it sounds then they wouldn't be, that they could potentially be desirable to somebody and not adesirable or undesirable.
So it's I want ants, I want that ant colony to be, dripping from the roof of the house. Again, I could interpret, it would take some interpretation, and I would try. I'd be is it because you're a conceptual artist?
Yeah,
is it because, but there needs to be some sort of further background understanding of what desire could even be. And if you can't get that answer, if there is no such answer, then I'd be that is adesirable. I do not know.
And I certainly enjoyed just even just the title of it, just the idea of adesirable as opposed to undesirable. It's as a non-philosopher, one of those thoughts I never even had before.
Yeah. It's not, that paper has not been cited by anybody, but there's one really good tweet about it. I don't know who this guy is, but he just got it, and the tweet is something a philosopher had to invent a term for me.
Aww. That's I feel that's probably the best compliment a philosopher can get.
I was dude, don't worry. You'll find her or him. You'll find them.
Yeah, that's. And my very last question would be that your dissertation, as I understand it, was called "Loving the Bad and Not Giving a Damn: A Defense of Psychic Disharmony." Right. So what I'm wondering is, should we give a damn about ants?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just had to ask.
Full-hearted.
Good.
No psychic disharmony for me vis-a-vis ants, except for when they're in my house.
I mean, that sounds like some psychic disharmony.
Or if there's too many of them, or if they're army ants.
Oh. Because maybe it could be too destructive to nature or something.
Yeah, they're coming up, right? They're heading north.
It's possible. I guess I would predict that would happen with overall warming moving northwards, but I'm not sure. I'm not familiar. Someone in the ant lab, it's also in the ant lab, in the Corey Moreau's ant lab, studied army ants, but I don't know the expansion.
Even them, even though I would be sad that they messed stuff up. I love that. I love the weird, freaky. Or fire ants, I guess.
Fire ants are definitely moving northward. Yeah.
Moving when we had the freaky floods in Houston, and one of the warnings was watch out for balls of fire ants.
Yeah, they could do it with rafts. Yeah.
I was I definitely don't want to run into one of those, but I love that they do that. Like,
That's amazing. Which sounds like it's still a version of giving a damn. So yeah, that's yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Well, I think that probably we've been chatting for now 45 minutes of just wonderful ant like kind of ant tangled philosophy sort of but I guess at the end, is there anything? Do you have any remaining like philosophical thoughts and or questions about ants?
What do you love about ants?
What do I love about ants? I mean, literally everything, basically. But in seriousness, I think the number one thing is actually just the diversity, like just the variation of those. Like, there's like 13,000 known species of ants, and like the variation. There's like ants that do things like raft building. Like I only learned about that, the fire ants that make rafts, maybe like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and I've been studying for about 10 years, studying ants for 10 years, and like it's like just there's so many things. There's a nomadic fungus farming ant that literally is nomadic and goes around and collects fungus in Southeast Asia. It's just like there's just so many cool things, and it's pretty almost like feels like limitless. So I think that's probably my favorite thing about ants.
So the diversity, yeah. So how many of those species are going to go extinct in like the next?
I mean, that's one thing is like because there's so many. Same is a problem with insects. There's a lot of times not really like don't know for sure. Like there's probably ones going extinct we don't know about it. So it's even hard for me to evaluate. There's a really like extreme like paucity of that type of work for insects. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't really know. But yeah, there are some I think overall predictions of insect species going extinct. Though I think even the most recent study that was a lot of the work on that was about abundance rather than species per se.
Yeah.
But because it's just very hard. I mean, it's like yeah, but there are some endangered. There are some endangered insects, and I'm sad to say some invasive ants can also contribute to pushing species out. So yeah, but
do you have hope?
I try to always have hope, despite the interview with Dr. like Rivka Weinberg. I still like to think that things have a point and that there's hope. So yeah, I have hope that at least like some. Like the nature will persist. Certainly.
Oh, nature will persist.
Yeah, like and there are so many species of ants. I don't have fear that like all ants will go extinct, but I do feel a little bit fatalistic about. Well, one of the hopes is actually to me is that human population I think is actually predicted to basically plateau by the end of the century, according to the UN, and I feel like that's a little bit hopeful in terms of like expansion, and the fact that we're becoming more urbanized has downsides, but one benefit actually is that it uses less land. So I have some hope of like restoring and stuff like that. So
that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Benjamin.
Well, no, thank you. Especially for taking almost an hour of your time to suffer through talking about ants and philosophy and the variety of different cool stuff that you're working on and thinking about.
All right.
Yeah. Talk to you later, I'm sure, and I'll let you know when this goes up.
Oh. Take care. Say hi to Josh for me.
I will.
Bye.
Bye.